right, a very pleasant good evening to you. Welcome to the 2018 League of Women Voters Candidates Night. I'm WZMO's Tom Kennedy. I will be doing my best to moderate our event this evening. Before I do the introduction of our candidates, I would like to turn over to Ms. Beth Babich for a moment. She's going to give you instructions and greetings from the League of Women Voters. Ms. Babich?
Thank you. Good evening. I am Beth Babich, co-president with R.J. Bicking of the League of Women Voters of Marion, Ohio. We welcome you to Candidates Night as we all take part in the great tradition of the American democracy, the political debate. League of Women Voters is a national organization with over 700 local units. Nonpartisan and nonprofit, League does not endorse or support parties or political candidates. We encourage all citizens to become informed and to participate in their government. Join League. We're delighted to welcome all citizens of voting age, male and female. Fill out and return the form from your seat, talk with a League member, call 740-389-5795, or email us at marionleague@yahoo.com. The voter guide, published last Thursday's Marion Star and available all around town, is also available online at vote411.org, a National League of Women Voters website that has even more candidate information. For an email copy, please email us at marionleague@yahoo.com. We invite you to visit the campaign literature table. Candidates and ballot issue representatives have been welcome to place literature there and to speak one-on-one with you after the debate. We are very grateful to WZMO 104.7 FM radio and their station manager, Tom Kennedy, for arranging tonight's broadcast and for moderating the debate. We're grateful to Harding Telecom's videotaping crew, led by telecommunication teachers John Mullins, who enable us to be on the air as a rebroadcast and to be online as well at YouTube. Thank you to our generous donors who support our work. Now, some reminders of League policy and ground rules. At least 2 candidates for any given race must be present to participate. No one will be allowed to speak for an absent candidate. Questions should be confined strictly to the issues and not personalities. If a question is addressed to all the candidates for a specific office, then each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question. No rebuttals. Candidates will alternate answering first. If a question is addressed to an individual candidate, that candidate has 1 minute to respond. Then the opposing candidate may offer a 1-minute rebuttal, and the original candidate has a 30-second wrap-up. The use of signs, gestures, or electronic text messaging devices to communicate with the candidates during the debate are prohibited. Unauthorized recording or videos, by cell phone or otherwise, are not allowed because the FCC requires that a debate must not be edited and must be rebroadcast in its entirety. In fairness and respect to the candidates and to the radio listening audience, League requests that people in attendance remain silent. We now turn the program over to our moderator, Tom Kennedy, to start our debate.
Thank you, Ms. Babich. Good evening. We will begin this evening with introductions. What I would like to do is introduce uncontested candidates first, those that are not seated on our panel tonight. Mrs. Joan Casotis, Marion County Auditor. Are you here? Please stand a moment. I'm sorry. League invited contested candidates on September 6th. On October 2nd, Judge candidate Warren Tom Edwards emailed that he would not be able to attend because of a previous commitment. U.S. Representative Ohio 4th District candidate Jim Jordan has not responded despite calls and emails to his office. Because of their absence, we may not seat their opponents, Janet Garrett and Jim Slagle. At the end of the event this evening, you may please take advantage of chatting with those candidates that are here. Mr. Slagle, if you would please stand a moment so we can greet you. And Janet Garrett, are you in the audience this evening? Okay. We appreciate the attendance of the opponents, and as you may meet with them after the debate, Janet Garrett is, of course, running for U.S. Representative, Ohio 4th District. Mr. Slagle is running for Common Pleas Court Judge. Thank you, Mr. Slagle. Today also we heard from Mr. Reardon McLean, candidate for the Ohio Legislative District. He would like to come, has come, and his opponent, Mary Pierce Broadwater, has not responded, so we're not able to seat him. Mr. Reardon, and he's over in the corner. Now we'll hear from contested candidates who will participate in our debate this evening. I would first like to introduce all of our panel, and then I will give each one an opportunity for their opening statements. Running for Commissioner of Marion County, Ms. Tara Dyer, Mr. Kenneth Stuyvesant. Candidates for Prosecuting Attorney for Marion County, Mr. Ray Grogan, Mr. Jeff Ratliff. Running for Judge of Common Pleas Court of Marion County, Mr. Mark Russell, Mr. Jason Warner. Candidates for Representative of the Ohio 86th District, Mr. Glenn David Coble, Mr. Taylor A. Hoffman, and Mrs. Tracy Richardson. They are our panel this evening. So let's begin with each of them giving a 90-second introduction. Ms. Dyer?
First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting us here today. My name is Tara Dyer, and I'm the face behind the Unity in the Community campaign, and I want to be your next county commissioner. I was born and raised in Marion. I'm a mother of 4, grandmother of 5. I serve on the Marion Public Health Board, the Peace and Freedom Committee, the Black Heritage Council, the Democratic Nominating Committee. I'm a volunteer surrogate for the Marion City Schools, and I also volunteer for Meals on Wheels through the Life Care Alliance. According to the Commissioner's Handbook, a commissioner must be able to lead, listen to the needs of the citizens, and work with other elected officials. That job description has my name written all over it. I am honest, compassionate, hardworking, and driven. These are the qualities that I will bring to the office of commissioner. Well, what exactly does TARA stand for? Truth, trust, transparency. Truth, I may not know the answers, but I will work 110% to find the solutions. Trust, you've trusted me for 35 years with your children, and you can trust me again to work hard as your county commissioner. Transparency, I will run an open government with an open door policy utilizing updated and modern technology. I am Tara Dyer, and I'm asking for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Mr. Kenneth Stuyvesant.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for this evening and this opportunity to meet with the community and the League. I want to start by saying that I have been honored to serve as your Marion County Commissioner for the past 8 years. Over this time, I've built strong relationships with county leaders, elected officials of both parties, and community leaders to help us move forward. I have worked to combine, I feel one of the greatest accomplishments, the combining of a dispatch system in Marion County to do the so we don't have transfer calls anymore. I've worked with other organizations. I've been honored to serve on the Can Do Board to bring economic development to Marion. I've also helped with Marion Made community, in which business want to locate here, and we want to, it's a good place to live. I'm committed to provide the same fiscal responsibility, cooperate, accessible, and forward-thinking leadership to Marion County in the next 4 years as I have in the past 8. almost 8. Working together, we can overcome obstacles and take advantage of the great spirit of our community and bring jobs and opportunities of a bright future to everyone who calls Marion County home. Thank you.
Candidates for prosecuting attorney for Marion County. Mr. Ray Grogan.
First, I'd like to thank the league for having me here tonight. I'd also like to thank you, Jeff, for agreeing to be here as well. I'm looking forward to a vigorous discussion tonight. I'm Ray Grogan, your Marion County prosecutor. My wife Carrie and I, with our 2 boys, Carter and Cooper, live here in Marion County in Pleasant Township. I've called Marion my home for the entirety of my professional career. I started a solo law practice here in Marion nearly 10 years ago, but I always wanted to be a prosecutor. Brent Yeager hired me as one of his assistant prosecutors several years ago, and I worked as one of his assistants for 3 years. I was appointed to this position after Brent passed last year and have been in the office since that time. I work hard for you each day as your prosecutor. I've been prosecuting cases for 4 years now. I have overseen the prosecution of approximately 800 felony cases. My work has been recognized as I've been endorsed by the Marion County Fraternal Order of Police, former Marion Police Chief Tom Bell, and recently Tim Bailey, our county sheriff and Democrat, also endorsed me in this race. I am honored to have such strong support from our local law enforcement community. Since taking office, I've also increased tax foreclosures on a per parcel basis by 300%. In fact, I've caused tax foreclosures to be filed on more than 160 parcels, totaling more than $1.3 million in back taxes being sought for our schools and our townships. This race is about the safety of our community, make no mistake about it. And with your vote, I will continue to do all that I can each day to continue to ensure the safety of our community. Thank you.
Mr. Jeff Ratliff.
I'm Attorney Jeff Ratliff, and I'm asking to become your next Marion County prosecutor. First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for all their hard work and efforts for putting this great event here today. Next, I'd like to thank you, those in attendance and those listening at home, for making yourself an informed voter in this important election. I decided to run for Marion County prosecutor on a simple premise. I love my community, and I want to make my community the safest place to raise our families. I am from Marion, and I am for Marion. The Ratliff family moved here in 1958. I was born here, raised here, I went to school here. My wife Kelly and I chose to raise our family here. As your next Marion County prosecutor, I vow to seek justice for victims by transforming the prosecutor's office into one that is tough. I think our community is safer when violent criminals, sex offenders, drug dealers, and those that commit crimes against the elderly know that our community will not put up with their conduct. I've been an attorney for a decade. I offer you my jury trial experience, appellate experience, leadership, and positive results. I care about our county, and I will be and always will be your neighbor. I humbly ask for your confidence and support by voting for me, Jeff Ratliff, as your next Marion County prosecutor. I will champion the tough issues that our community faces. Thank you.
Running for Judge of Common Pleas Court of Marion County, Mr. Mark Russell.
Good evening. I am Mark Russell. I too thank the league for hosting us this evening. I too am a lifelong resident like Jeff Ratliff. I have been honored to have been endorsed by you, the Marion voters, on 5 prior election days, chosen by you to be your prosecutor in Marion Municipal Court. Let me turn to why I am the most qualified candidate. My mentors were Judge Rogers and Judge Finnegan. They showed me that applying a common sense approach to justice was the key to being a successful judge. And importantly, holding criminals accountable, always putting the safety of our neighborhoods first. As your prosecutor, that is exactly what I have done, and with your vote on November 6th, you can count on me to continue to do just that. In addition, I have continued the practice of Judge Finnegan, safeguarding your tax dollars, even returning budgeted monies during the recession to keep police officers on our streets. This November, choose experience. I have 26 years of hands-on experience handling a vast array of complex legal matters, including many major litigation cases and implementing innovative programs with successful outcomes. creating savings of millions of taxpayer dollars. This compared to my opponent, whose career has been an appointed employee, a decade of which was an appointed employee working under me as an assistant. This November, choose the senior partner, vote Mark Russell for Common Pleas Court Judge, and you will be right on the mark.
Mr. Warner.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm running for judge because I was born and raised here in Marion, Ohio. I love this community, and I desperately want to see our community regain a reputation as a great place in which to live and work and raise a family. I'm running for judge because I believe that service as a judge is a true calling, not simply the next step up the political ladder. I am not a politician. Unlike my opponent, who is this year running for his third different office in the past 4 years, I've never run for elective office before. I have no intention to run for any other office after I'm elected in this position. I've spent my entire career actually on the front lines and in the courtroom almost every day preparing myself for this moment. I'm running for judge because I've been encouraged to do so by countless citizens of Marion County, including dozens who serve in the law enforcement community. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of the Marion County Fraternal Order of Police. My opponents have repeatedly said throughout this campaign that we need to stop the revolving door in the Common Pleas Court, and I absolutely agree. What he has not told you is that when the FOP endorsement was announced, their president was quoted as saying, Jason Warner earned the endorsement of the Marion County Fraternal Order of Police because we know that he will end the revolving door in the justice system. Mr. Warner has demonstrated time and time again that he understands what this community needs from the bench during his time as magistrate in the municipal court. I'm humbled to be here tonight, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Candidates for representative of the Ohio 86th District. Mr. Glenn Coble.
Hi, I'm Glenn Coble. I was brought up by a liberal Republican mother and a Methodist minister father. Their teachings of fairness and honesty have become my core beliefs, which led me to run for office. In this time of one-party rule, where the nation, state, and district have gerrymandered majorities that destroy the concept of one person, one vote, we have corrupted the meaning of democracy and taken humanity out of our government with money and Citizens United law. I stand for the right of women to make the choice regarding their own bodies and as established in Roe versus Wade. I am for sensible gun laws, such as universal background checks and banning devices like bump stocks. I'm not opposed to hunting or family protection. I am against the escalation of the deadliness of our weapons. I believe we need to expand the Affordable Care Act and quit restrictions designed to push people, mainly poor people, out of the program. We need to quit the trickle-down policies of giving to the rich and taking from the poor. We now have the largest discrepancy ever between the rich and the poor. We have a $2.7 billion rainy day fund. We hoard this money while Ohio is in the top 5 states in opioid deaths. My fellow Ohioans, it's raining to death out here, and we need to spend some of that funding on helping citizens help themselves.
Mr. Taylor Hoffman. Okay. Mrs. Tracy Richardson.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, and I too extend a special thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting us tonight. It truly is a pleasure to be with all of you, especially here in the audience, on the radio, and my fellow candidates. After much consideration and prayer, I decided to run for state representative because I saw a need for an experienced leader of character, commitment, and compassion to step up when our current representative chose to step down and not seek re-election. There are 2 things tonight I want you to know about me. The first is that I am a values-driven person. My motto is faith, family, freedom. The second, I am an experienced leader who is motivated by a desire to serve others. I've served my country, my community, and my family. At 18, I enlisted in the U.S. Army and a short time later entered the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. when there had only been 3 classes of women graduates. I learned there that I had to be competent to compete, and I also had to be a team player. I am a decorated combat veteran of Desert Storm. I'm currently serving as a major in the U.S. Army Reserves. I've not only served my country, but I am currently in my 9th year of service to my community as a city councilwoman in Marysville and 6th year as a member of the Drug-Free Coalition. I've served my family as a wife to Chris for 28 years and mother of 3 young men. Service is important to me. I'm Tracy Richardson.
Mrs. Richardson, time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to be the one who knows that's the leading circle. Thank you.
We will begin our questioning. First of all, to our listening audience, if you have questions you would like to phone in, we have ladies from the League of Women Voters on telephones now. The number you can call is area code 419-843-7545. And my goodness, look at this stack already. I, before we begin, feel like Ed McMahon. If you'll give me just 1 second, I hold in my hand the questions for tonight's candidates. These questions have been hermetically sealed and kept in a mayonnaise jar on Funkin' Wagonals porch since noon today. No one but I and the League of Women Voters know the contents of these questions. And thank you. I appreciate some of you remembering the Karnak Magnificent piece. I'd have been very embarrassed otherwise. Now, for questions to both candidates, you'll have 1 minute to respond each and then no rebuttals. If a question is to a specific candidate, the candidate has 1 minute to respond. The opposing candidate can offer a 1 minute rebuttal. Then the original candidate may have a 30-second wrap-up. We begin in the prosecutor's race. This question is to Mr. Grogan. Can you elaborate as to why cases are being dismissed or pled down to lesser charges?
Well, I'm happy to discuss that. My opponent has made much about some dismissals that have occurred. Most specifically, my opponent on a billboard says that drug dealers and murderers cases have been dismissed, and then it's underneath that undercurrent prosecutor. But ultimately, that is not true. There was a murder case, and he cites the case number 17 CR 318. And in that case was State of Ohio v. Barbara Strickland, which is the case he's referring to, the murder case that was supposedly dismissed. That case was dismissed on October 11th, 2017. I did not come back to the prosecutor's office until 2 weeks after that. So my question, I suppose then, and for your response, Mr. Ratliff, is were you just lying to the voters, or were you just so wholly incompetent that you couldn't get your facts straight?
Mr. Ratliff, rebuttal?
Yes, regarding that case, I guess Mr. Grogan didn't know that Brent Yeager in his office made him a special prosecutor on the case prior to him even being hired in. The problem is they filed his special prosecutor in the cocaine case that she had pending that got dismissed. This is problem one, he works for that office. They filed it in a dismissed case. He didn't even know he was special prosecutor on the case that eventually gets dismissed. That's what's appalling, because the problems beforehand are continuing under him. He dismissed the case. He was the special prosecutor on the case. He then became the appointed prosecutor. The information and the voter alerts that I have given everybody is the tip of the iceberg. Over 47% of the cases he's handled from January of 2018 to October of 2018 have been pled down or dismissed. Those counts should be brought forth. The people need to feel safer.
Mr. Grogan, would you like to
30
respond?
seconds. I'm very proud of my record as your prosecutor. Joshua McCoy went to trial. He raped a 5-year-old. I tried that case. He was sentenced to life without parole, plus an additional 8 years. Barbara Strickland, Jackie Miller was a murderer. I tried that case 6 weeks after being appointed. She was sentenced to 15 years to life. 2 other child rapists were sentenced to terms of 10 years to life. I'm very proud of my record as your prosecutor, and it's what's earned me the support of law enforcement. The bottom line is, Mr. Ratliff, your billboard is a lie. It is inaccurate, and you know it, and you just admitted it.
Thank you, gentlemen. The following question is also to the prosecuting attorney's office. This is to Mr. Ratliff. Your father is a prominent local defense attorney in Marion. How much influence will he have on your run for the office, the cases you prosecute, or the charges you plead cases to?
So individuals can understand, my father is J.C. Ratliff. We have a private practice. I practice with my brother and my father. My father doesn't have influence on me now and the cases that I handle, and I handle those cases separate and apart from him even today. When I become prosecutor, he will have less influence on me. He doesn't write my paycheck, nor will he have any influence in the office. This is a question of concern that surprises me, because in actuality, any case that my brother or my father would have, I must sequester myself from the case. It will cause no further money to prosecute that, and if there is even a further conflict, a special prosecutor can be used, which is easily done in many cases. And in fact, I would hope and beg that I could go up against my father and my brother in a case that I can't, because they would not like the result that would happen, and I would really take them to the woodshed.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Grogan.
Thank you. My opponent is correct. He has spent decades in private practice representing criminals charged with crimes, among other cases. I've devoted nearly half my career to being a prosecutor. I'm committed to it. It's my passion. It's what I love to do. And I learned, Mr. Russell spoke earlier about a mentor. I had a pretty phenomenal mentor, too. His name was Brent Yeager. And ultimately, I guess my concern, you just said that you would sequester yourself from the case, Mr. Ratliff, but if your brother or your father gets a murder case or a rape case or a very serious felony case, is it your intention then not to, as the county prosecutor, handle that case? And I ask because Jackie Miller's murder case, I handled. Joshua McCoy's rape of a 5-year-old, I handled. Michael Warner, Michael Brown, 2 individuals who raped children, I handled those cases. Todd Smith was a bank robbery trial, I handled that case. I think it's important for the county prosecutor to handle the big cases. Is it your intention not to do that if your brother and father get a big case?
Mr. Ratliff.
Yes, the rules and ethical rules do not allow me to handle that case. That is why you have staff. If you do not have an individual in your own prosecutor's office that you can trust to hire and do a murder case, he should not be working in your office. Anyone in the office should be able to handle a top felony 1, felony 2 case in your office. If not, he shouldn't be hired there. So if my father or brother gets some big murder case, I can either, 1, have somebody in what's called the Attorney General's office handle it.
Mr. Ratliff, time? Thank you. County Commissioner question next. This is to Mr. Stuyvesant. What goals have you accomplished as present County Commissioner?
Well, I think County Commissioner, if you remember, I came in 2011. That was a recession, I guess you could call it, and we had to do a lot of things that we didn't want to do for safety of Marion County, but we did not have the funds. But I think we've built our treasurer back up, or not a treasurer, our revenue back up, so that we've been able to give Tim Bailey, the sheriff, more deputies on the road and more deputies in his facility. We've purchased 15 new cruisers since then in the last 7 years since that incident. And I think we've improved the computer systems in the county immensely. I happen to be on the data board, and we've moved up to the we're not in the 21st century yet, but we're in the 20th century. We were in about the 18th when I first came in, and that was because of funding, and we've moved forward with that
Mr.
very much.
Stuyvesant, time.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dyer, hold just a moment. Mr. Mullins, if you're back there at the back, is there a possibility you've got some tape you could bring up? Our receiver is losing signal, I think, because of the number of folks in the room. If we could tape it to the tripod, I think that'll help. Mrs. Dyer.
In response to the goals and things that have been accomplished from the County Commissioner's Office, I've been attending the meetings for about 10 months. And I know that although there are limited funds to do limited things, I really think the technology piece is one that's lacking in the commissioner's office. I am on the county page a lot, and you can go to the auditor's page and you get a lot of information about what the auditor's doing, things that are important for the people, an informational type page. One of the things I said in my opening statement is I want to use modern day technology. I know Mr. Syverson said he's not there yet, but you know, we're in the age of Twitter, we're in the age of Facebook, we're in the age of that technology that will allow these people to get a lot of information.
Mr. Syverson?
Technology-wise, I think she mentioned the auditor's office. We're just starting a program with the auditor's office of $280,000 we've invested out of our capital fund to improve the communication between the auditors and all the departments in the county, which should really help ease the workload. Also in our office, we're short one person, so our webpage or whatever isn't up to date. I admit that, but we've got to do the regular business first.
Thank you. Our next question is still staying with the county commissioners. This is to Tara Dyer. How can you as commissioner make information more accessible to the citizens?
Well, that's rewind and play what we just said. Information should be easily accessible, and what I mentioned before was Twitter, Facebook. The webpage does need to be up to date and not under construction. There's a lot of things that the commissioners do. As I mentioned, I've been attending the meetings. There's a lot of things that you people need to know what they're doing. And in other counties, they have their meetings are live streamed. They have taped. The commissioners had a meeting today. Do you know what happened in the meeting today? Do you know what happened with Sims Brothers? I mean, so there's a lot of information that we're not getting because we're not assessing the things, and we're not getting those things on the web pages.
Mr. Syverson.
Well, I somewhat agree with her, but everything she talked about costs money, and we have higher priorities than some of those things. I've always thought, and I was on a school board for 9 years, we had more people come to those meetings. I know they're in the mornings, but our door is always open if people want to ask questions. We very seldom have over 2 or 3 in our meetings of what's going on. And it is a public meeting, just like city council or anything else, and they can come and interact with us or call us anytime to find out what's going on. We have a lot of business transactions there on a weekly basis, and I'm just hopefully we can improve that in the next 4 years that I'm there, but as of now, we don't put a lot of information out. You can get the minutes from the meetings and so forth, and attend meetings.
Ms. Dyer, response?
My response, I don't know where I asked for an agenda. You can get on the email, kind of like Train, and have them send you the agenda along with the resolutions and what's happening in the meetings. And oftentimes, you know, it's hard to discern what's going on because you're right, you do have to attend the meetings. So I'm just worried that the minutes do not create and show you the substance.
Thank you. Our next question is for the State Representative 86th District candidates. This is to all of you. Why did you choose to run for this office? What are your views on the LGBTQA rights and protections? We'll start with Mr. Coble.
Okay. Well, I decided to run to give you all a choice. This lady is a very nice lady. There's nothing wrong with this lady, but I want to give you a choice between where she stands and where I stand. That's all there is. Matter of fact, we're both Army vets. We even know the secret grip, but we're not going to show it to you today. I decided to run. I was a big fan of Obama. I'll flat out say I worked for him for 8 years, and I'm proud to say that I am. He inspired me, along with my mom and my sister, who are both angels. And we decided to, my wife and I decided that I would run to further the cause of Obama and the more progressive side of the aisle. And I'd appreciate your vote in November.
Mrs. Richardson.
I started to say a little bit about this in my opening statements, but I believe we need a shift in culture. I think we need people of character who are willing to reach across the aisle and shake hands like Glenn and I have done tonight and really work together to solve problems. I am a problem solver, and that's what I intend to do on behalf of all of us. I stepped up to the plate because there was a need, because there are a need for people of character and commitment and courage and hard work. And I want to be the person that you know and trust to work hard on our behalf. I've spent quite a bit of time in the district here, especially in Marion, because I'm not from Marion, to learn and understand what the needs are. And I will continue to do that. I hope I will have your support. Thank you.
Mr. Kubel, you may do a 30-second wrap-up.
I think she was great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
For prosecuting attorney of Marion, no, I'm sorry, for judge of Common Pleas Court of Marion County. This is to Mr. Mark Russell. When did we become a sanctuary city and who approved it? No, I'm sorry, this is to Mr. Mark Russell first and then Mr. Warner. Mr. Russell.
As the elected city prosecutor, city law director, I work directly with the council. The city of Marion is not a sanctuary city. The city receives funding from the federal government that funds police officers, and within the last 3 or 5 years, they've required municipalities to sign, the mayor of the municipality, to sign a document that in accepting the grant, your city will not become or be a sanctuary city. So I know that fact to not be true.
Thank you. Mr. Warner.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that question came from. I'm not sure what it has to do with either of our service as judge of the common pleas court. I don't really have any comment on that.
Okay, Mr. Russell, any?
No rebuttal.
Very good, thank you. Also for Common Pleas Court Judge, Mr. Russell, you have never tried, Mr. Russell, you have never tried a felony case nor participated in a jury trial in Common Pleas Court. How are you prepared to be a judge for that court?
I appreciate the question, but the question is factually errant. Early on in my practice, I did practice in the Common Pleas Court. Early on in my practice, I became an assistant prosecutor with the city and then no longer practiced in the Common Pleas Court. I am proud of my prosecutorial record in your Marion Municipal Court. 26 years of holding criminals accountable successfully. I'm proud of many accomplishments, but one in particular rises to the top. I am the only prosecutor in Marion Municipal Court history to have obtained a guilty jury verdict in a homicide murder case in municipal court, a crime where a life was taken. I'm also proud of the fact that during my service in your municipal court, we have had some of the highest conviction rates in the state of Ohio, holding criminals accountable. I will carry that successful track record to your Common Pleas Court with your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Mr. Warner.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. You never tried a felony case nor participated in a jury trial in Common Pleas Court. How are you prepared to be a judge in that court?
So that was directed to both of us? Or to, I think it was addressed to Mr. Russell. Honestly, it applies to both of us. We both have spent the great majority of our career in municipal court. There's no doubt about that. There's no questioning that. There's no getting around that. Mr. Russell has served as the elected law director for over 20 years. I've spent the great majority of my career also in municipal court. That does not in any way, shape, or form disqualify me from being able to serve as the judge of the Common Pleas Court. 2 words that I will say that does qualify me for judicial service in the Common Pleas Court: judicial experience. Judicial experience is judicial experience. I preside over cases every day. I make very difficult decisions every day. I sit on the bench wearing the robe every day. I'm required to understand and know the complex rules of criminal procedure and evidence and all the cases that come before me. And despite of the fact that I've not presided over cases in a common pleas court before, I am qualified to do so by virtue of the experience that I've gained while serving as a judicial official in municipal court. Thank you.
Mr. Russell, would you care to rebut?
Thank you. Briefly, in my opponent's appointed employee status as a magistrate in the municipal court, it was formerly called a referee. In that position, he's simply a helper to the judge, and Ohio law does not allow my opponent to make judgments. But let me say this. It's 26 years of experience holding criminals accountable that is most important. We have an issue in our county of not holding criminals accountable, and I will work to stop that in your common pleas court.
Thank you. This question is also to the judge candidates. This isn't really clear. This is to both of you. Is there any way when awarding foreclosure judgments to require a quick transfer of the deed should help with abandoned properties? Should help with abandoned properties? Mr. Warner, was there enough there for what the question was?
I'm not sure.
I think let's pass on that one if we can, please. It just was not a well-done question. All right. County Commissioners, both candidates, what will you do to rein in judicial branch spending in Marion County? Ms. Dyer.
What was the question?
What will you do to rein in judicial branch spending in Marion County?
What was that word, judicial what?
Branch spending in Marion County.
What would I do to rein in judicial branch spending in Marion County?
Yes, ma'am.
Question okay. Well, as we look at appropriations and look at numbers, and it's up to the county commissioners to appropriate money and to make sure that it is done in a concise and a effective way for the voters, because that's what we are. We are like watchdogs for the people's money. So as we try to take on that responsibility seriously, one of the things we need to do, and what I want to do, is take a look at how we're spending our money as far as our cases and our caseloads and judicial spending is. And that's one of my visions. I want to be able to look at, as we look at the budget, as we appropriate money, to make sure that the money is being spent in a way that is frugal and nice for the people.
Mr. Syverson.
Yes, as we all know, courts continue to have more cases, and so in the past 7 years of budgeting, we've instituted a 3% increase for all of them. That does not work always, because they have more caseload, they need more time on cases. That is one of the, I always say, we arrest them, we incarcerate them, and we try them. And the trying part is the most expensive. But we're very fortunate in this county with our opiate things. Judge Slagle has the drug court, and he's received a lot of funding from the state to help out our budget, so that's helped in the common pleas area. Juvenile, they've made it mandatory that all the young people that come in, they have to have a lawyer, and the county has to pay for that. We just added another $50,000 today.
Mrs. Dyer, a rebuttal?
As we know, grants, I know that we look at block grants for specific, and you mentioned the opioid crisis and what Judge Slagle is doing in the drug courts, but we can always be, on the lookout for more funding. And Ohio, I think, is going to address that. I just read an article in the County Commissioner's Handbook that discusses just ways that we can look and find those fundings.
Thank you, ma'am. This question is also to the commissioners. Ms. Dyer, you're first. Would you comment on the situation in the clerk of court's office and the need for an audit on the missing $8 million?
Yes, I would like to comment on that. The need for transparency is abundantly obvious in our county, not only in the clerk of courts situation, but in our Board of Elections. It's like Marion has just lost their mind. Everybody is just going cray-cray. So as we look at these instances, we were, for 17 years, the clerk of courts did and was derelict in her duties. Why did it take 17 years for us to figure that out? We're all smart people. Why did it take 17 years for us to understand what was happening in the clerk of court's office? And I did read, though, to Mr. Stuyvesant's credit, that in the Marion Star, in an article in 2017, he did say he went in there and he offered her some help, but she did not receive it in the spirit in which he gave it. So.
Mr. Stuyvesant.
Yes, I'm not sure. There hasn't been $8 million. I think they're using the figure of back tax, real estate taxes, and that has a part to do with it, but it has to be filed to her office. There hasn't been $8 million in foreclosures. Mr. Grogan's office has 300% increase in that in the last year or so. But yes, the clerk of court's office, since I've been there, when we did have the money in about 2014, I believe, we offered her more people, or more money for people, and she said she didn't have the room, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, so we got the money back. We give it to her the next year. She said didn't have the room, so we remodeled the second floor to so she could have more people, but as of today, I don't think she might have one more person.
Mrs. Dyer, would you like to come?
Yes, but as elected officials, aren't we kind of responsible for making sure that these things are taken care of and making sure that, I mean, we're all over the news as far as it's bad enough that we're in the news for our opioid crisis, but now it just seems like every time we turn around, there's something that is wrong in our government. We've got to work harder and together.
Thank you. The next question is for the county prosecutors. Mr. Grogan, Mr. Ratliff, and we'll start with Mr. Grogan. Will you vote for State Issue 1? Why or why not?
I will absolutely not vote for State Issue 1. I am adamantly opposed to State Issue 1. Sarah Volpenheimer, I believe, is here tonight from the Star, did a nice piece on State Issue 1, and was, I believe, quoted me as saying that I was adamantly opposed to it. I think any law that would allow an individual to walk around with enough fentanyl to kill 10,000 people to just be a misdemeanor offense is abhorrent and is, quite frankly, flies in the face of our values. And think about that, that's 18% of Marion County's population, and that'd be a misdemeanor. In addition to that, it would not allow judges to sentence an individual to any jail time on the first or second offense. You have to wait till the third time, apparently, carrying 19 grams of fentanyl around before you can finally send a person to jail. The other thing that really, the other thing is that well, I'll get to that in my 30-second response, so I'll yield my time.
Mr. Ratliff.
Yes, this might be the one issue that Grogan and I agree on, is that I am also opposed to Issue 1. When you talk to individuals that actually are working hands-on with probationers, and these individuals say that it removes their discretion on how to punish that individual for a probation violation, it gives me great concern. So I would be opposed to Issue 1. I think the problem we have is when we don't recognize what's positive about Issue 1 is that Issue 1 recognizes a problem in our community and in our society. It recognizes that nonviolent criminals are in prison and our population is overcrowded. I believe it is doing it the wrong way, trying to make it a constitutional amendment to force it on individuals, and I think it's just not the right way to go about it. However, it is recognizing a real issue that we have, that at some point, we're going to have to decide what we're going to do about it.
Thank you, Mr. Grogan. Rebuttal?
Yeah, the other aspect that state issue one that the news media doesn't really discuss all that often is it also allows for a up to a 25% reduction in prison sentences in certain cases, with the exception of murder, rape, and child molestation. Only that term isn't defined. I don't think someone who commits a kidnapping or a bank robbery or an armed robbery should be allowed to reduce their sentence. I think whatever the judge sentences them to, they ought to serve. Thank you.
Okay. The next question is to Ms. Dyer. What would you do, or what would you hope to accomplish in your term if elected as commissioner?
I have a vision for Marion. One of the things that I would like to see is us bring jobs back. The Southland Mall looks like a ghost town out there. The children go there and they watch a movie, and you probably get your nails done and Bath and Body Works, but it's like a ghost town. So I would like to see that. My other vision is related to the transit system, where the county is not included in the transit system. So I'd like to look at some transit issues. I talked to a friend that lived in the housing near Meyer, and she has to walk over to Meyer to get the bus, which is a barrier to employment. So I'm looking at trying to eliminate barriers that will not allow people to work.
Thank you, Mrs. Dyer. Mr. Stuyvesant, any comment?
No, I guess everybody, we all want good paying jobs, but I don't know if any of you realize that in 2017, Marion County had $160 million in expansion between Poet and several other new corps, and it brought some jobs to Marion, about 80 new jobs, and they're good paying jobs. And the transit thing, if people remember years in the past, Marion County did have a transit bus that went to the communities, but nobody rode on it, for one thing, and we were just driving around using taxpayers' dollars, and we have had discussions about that in the past with the health department and different people with doing some kind of a bus route through the villages, but nothing's come to it yet because of the cost of it.
Ms. Dyer, you have a 30-second wrap-up, since this question was to you.
I was on that committee that, with Marion Public Health, that did do the survey to transportation. And one of the things that, a couple of things came out of that survey. One is that the barrier that exists does adversely affect people of low income. The other thing that came about is we're not looking at transportation in a creative way. Transportation is an all-encompassing word that will allow a lot of things like carpooling.
Thank you. I hope we'll get back to this end of the table eventually this evening.
That's all right. Got a nap going.
County Commissioners, again, to both of you, please. Meetings seem to be only in the morning. Are there thoughts to make them more transparent and in the evening, perhaps in villages or townships? Mr. Stuyvesant, we'll start with you, please.
This has been a question brought up. We have other people involved in the meeting, so, I mean, we have the auditor's office and sometimes the treasurer's office and different things. We have had some public meetings in the evening, but the same, not at our, we went to different locations. No, we have not went to villages yet. I'd have to check, and I think we can, but I don't know if we have to, we'd have to take our recording system, and all of our people would have to go to there to explain to people the business that we were doing that day. So, yes, it would be possible. Yes, we've never explored it totally, I guess, to go to another place to have meetings.
Ms. Dyer?
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea, to go to different places to, as I mentioned in my opening statement, live stream seems to be the thing. And I know Mr. Severson said these things cost money, but I did look at a live stream meeting, I think it was in Delaware County, where people could participate and they could even watch them later on. They could tape a version of it, and they were able to then be an active participant in the county commissioners meeting. And not only that, they were able to identify things that were happening that affected them. And I think that's the most important thing. So the live stream, the ability to look at the webpage again, and utilizing up-to-date technology is where we need to go. I don't know how much it's gonna cost or whatever, but I think it's worth looking and exploring.
Thank you. For the judges of the Common Pleas Court, this is to both of you. In dealing with Marion County's opiate challenge, do you favor drug treatment or incarceration? Mr. Warner, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, we have to be very careful how we answer questions like this. As a judicial official myself and as a candidate for judicial office, we have judicial canons that prohibit us from making what could be deemed to be promises or commitments or pledges about how we might handle certain cases that might come before us. I can comment on my own personal views, but I have to be careful exactly how I put that. I strongly believe that as judicial officials, we need to remember that there are three different considerations when it comes to sentencing in criminal cases. Those would include rehabilitation of the offenders, protection of the public, and punishment for the offender. And I do think that we need to be very careful to remember all three of those things. I absolutely believe that we need to be holding criminal offenders accountable, that there need to be consequences for criminal conduct, and there would be when I become judge. Thank you.
Mr. Russell.
Thank you. I support the current policies of assisting persons with addiction to leave those addictions behind. I see success in our drug courts and municipal court and common pleas court. That is a valued endeavor and should continue, and I would strongly encourage it continuing as your common pleas court judge. What I do hear from constituents every day is they recognize our system is broken. It is my personal opinion that the political policies causing convicted felons and traffickers to live amongst us needs to change, and I will advocate for change of those political policies. For example, as your common pleas court judge, I would change administrative policies as to who is released from your jail back into our neighborhoods while their case is pending.
Thank you, sir. We have finally came to the 86th district end of the table. So, Mr. Coble and Mrs. Richardson, would you comment on the State House ECOT scandal, please, and the resignation of the former speaker? Mr. Coble.
Well, I think it has to continue on its, the FBI is looking into it at this particular point, and I believe that it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of money to be made by certain legislators if they know the right people and if they know how to tap the right places. I think that we need to look very seriously next time we decide we want to go into a educational system like ECOT. I'm a big education fan. I have received endorsements from 2 educational programs, and I think teachers should be able to teach. I'm an old proponent of public school, and I like public school, and that will be where most of my support is. I think we need to look deeply into the problems that have come up from ECOT.
Thank you. Mrs. Richardson.
Yes, I am actually the daughter of a high school principal, and I have a great passion for education as well. I believe that ECOT started with the best intentions, And I think along the way there have been some concerns and some problems. This we do agree on, that they should be investigated, but I do preserve the right for free choice. I'd like to support those who want to choose how to learn. I have friends that really rely on online learning for their children. They have special needs. They don't do well in the classroom. They're bullied in some schools. And so as a state, I do think we need to preserve school choice. Thank you.
Thank you. The prosecutors. Mr. Ratliff, we'll start with you. I'm sorry?
I don't respond to that, right?
No, because that was to both candidates.
Gotcha.
Prosecutor's Office, Mr. Ratliff. Will you support appointment of a special prosecutor to look into claims of back channeling by John Meyer? Do you think that Meyer acted appropriately?
This news broke, and if any of you watched the video, I encourage you to do so. What's happened is that we need to have this investigated. Whether it's the current prosecutor that wants to do it, or if he wants to recuse himself because he's of the same political party of the individual involved, and a lot of the emails and communications actually involve him, he might want to actually appoint a special prosecutor to look into this. Now, whether we think something happened, didn't happen, unless you investigate it, you definitely don't know whether it happened or not. So it needs to be investigated and it needs to be looked at. Otherwise, how do we know that our elections are not fair when the Republican director is emailing individuals associated with the Democratic or the Republican Party and not the Democratic Party? You need to understand a lot of these emails are going to a felon who has committed theft in office, who is still and is on my opponent's campaign. Thank you.
Mr. Grogan.
I've referred the matter to the state. They will do with it what they will. So the matter has already been referred. And that's the crux of it.
Okay. This question is also to the prosecutor's office. Is your claim about the dismissed murder charge accurate, Mr. Grogan? That's,
It's to Jeff Ratliff.
all right, Mr. Ratliff. All right, I apologize. Is your claim about the dismissed murder charge accurate?
It's absolutely accurate. We already went over this once. He was the special prosecutor on the case. Brent Yeager was sick and he was no longer able to handle the case. They filed a notice of appearance for him to appear as a special prosecutor. She was released and her case was dismissed. He was the prosecutor handling that case. Everything I've provided to you is accurate information. And ladies and gentlemen, what case did he bring up? One. How many are on those voter alerts? There's more than one. And that's the tip of the iceberg. Since January until October, 47% of the counts have been pled to a reduced charge or have been dismissed. That is the results he's getting. He talks about and touts his hard work. Ladies and gentlemen, you can work as hard as you want, but when you get to a jury trial and your office cannot identify the drug dealer and the case gets dismissed, everybody's hard work, including the police, went right out the window. Thank you.
Mr. Grogan.
Thank you. Mr. Ratliff, you ought to know because you're the one who signed a notice of filing and closed case responding to Yeager's office's attempt to make me a special prosecutor in the Barbara Strickland murder case. You're right, they filed in the wrong case number, and you signed the filing responding to it in the wrong case number. You know there was never an entry put on making me a special prosecutor in the murder case. You know that is accurate because your firm represented the woman accused of murder. So you know that the case was dismissed October 11th. You know I didn't take office until 2 weeks after that. It's wrong. It's a lie. Now you're doubling down on it. You know, the sheriff, the Democrat sheriff, in the article in which he endorsed me, referred to your campaign tactics as shady and backhanded. And I have to say, I agree with that assessment. I'm proud, and we talk about dismissals, I could not be prouder to have the support of Sheriff Bailey, a member of the opposite party, in the Marion County Fraternal Order of Police.
Mr. Ratliff, you may rebut.
Yes, as a rebuttal, once again, he was the special prosecutor on the case. The fact that they filed it due to his incompetence in a case that got dismissed, and I had to point it out to him, is embarrassing. He should embarrass and he should apologize to everybody in here because he doesn't know what he's doing. The truth of the matter is, he's not a good prosecutor.
Can I please respond to that?
No, you can't.
No, I'm
The
sorry,
rules don't allow
sir.
it.
I'll get it on the next one.
And unfortunately, my next question is still with the prosecutor's office. Could have had a break there. Mr. Grogan, you're first. What staff will you be bringing to the office if you win the election?
I'll be keeping my current staff, and they're doing a great job. They are. In 10 months in office, I've been able to obtain 4 potential life sentences for violent offenders. It's this work that has earned me the unanimous endorsement of the Marion County Fraternal Order of Police. Every law enforcement officer who voted in that endorsement process voted for me. None of them voted for Jeff Ratliff, and that's a fact. I'm very proud of my record, and I'm very proud of my staff. Mr. Ratliff knows if I was not appointed special prosecutor in the murder case, I am not allowed to look at the file. I would have no access to it. I wasn't at the office at the time. But because he's stammering now, because he knows that that's accurate. He knows his billboard's a lie. He knows his tactics have been shady and backhanded, as the sheriff has said. Thank you.
Mr. Ratliff?
And the question is in response to who I would have. Everybody in the office is going to be able to apply for their same position. I've told everybody, and I continue to say, my staff will have the best attorney possible to be on my staff, regardless of political party. Whether they're a Democrat or Republican, my staff will be the best. And it's appalling to me that he thinks that somebody who can't identify a defendant in court, where all you have to say, can you please, witness, please identify the defendant, and they point him out, is pretty embarrassing.
Thank you. I sure wish I could shuffle the cards. Mr. Ratliff, this next question is to you. What makes you more professionally qualified to be county prosecutor than the current prosecutor?
Ladies and gentlemen, I have more experience. We were sworn in essentially the same day, November of 2008. I was in jury trial within my first week. I have more jury trials. I've practiced criminal law in over 42 counties. I've practiced in numerous Ohio appellate courts, and I've practiced before the Supreme Court of Ohio and been there for oral argument. I have more experience than my opponent. He keeps wanting to say I haven't prosecuted a case. Ladies and gentlemen, only a prosecutor can do that. He has actually been a part of the same office that's created a lot of the problems that we have. I have more experience than him. And ladies and gentlemen, if the experience that he has gotten you the results that you have gotten, I don't want it because it's bad experience and it's given us more problems, not solutions. Thank you.
Mr. Grogan.
I've spent nearly half my career as a prosecutor all here in Marion County. I've overseen the prosecution of 800 felony cases. My opponent's right. He's never prosecuted so much as a traffic ticket. 6 weeks after taking office, I tried a murder trial. I've tried a rape trial since I've come back. I've tried a bank robbery trial, felonious assault trial, a kidnapping trial. The breadth of my experience as your county prosecutor, I think, is pretty telling, and I think makes me the much more qualified candidate because I'm doing it currently. Mr. Ratliff, you say you have more experience. That's just another lie. And quite frankly, that's all I'm going to say about it. It's just not true.
Mr. Ratliff, you have 30 seconds.
I do have more experience. He can only say I haven't prosecuted cases. Ladies and gentlemen, I have represented 2 juries in all these cases, in all these jury trials I've had. I've told the jury how the prosecution should have handled the case. I create reasonable doubt. I tell them how they should have done their job. And once again, I have to tell this prosecutor how he should do his job. Thank you.
Thank you. For Mr. Coble and Mrs. Richardson. To Mrs. Richardson. All right. What are the 2 most important challenges facing Ohio, and how would you address them?
Well, I think clearly we have a very specific drug problem. We've talked about it a lot. To solve the problem, we are going to have to work together. We are going to have to synchronize the effort. We're going to have to start at the state level and go all the way down to the local level and I've been very involved at the local level. I've seen where people work together, putting their heads together, schools and churches and local government officials and law enforcement, and we all get together. We can work through this, and we can support the addicted. That's a big problem. The second big problem I believe we need to look at is developing the workforce. We have jobs, but we don't always have people who can fill those jobs because they don't have the skills they need. So those are the two problems I think we need to tackle, and I'm prepared to do it. Thank you.
Mr. Coble.
Well, I listed most of the things that I thought we needed to work on in my opening statement. To cut it down to two, it's a little tough. I'm going to start with the corruption of one-party rule. We have at the nation, we have the Republicans. At the state, we have the Republicans. At the district, we have the Republicans. Oh, by the way, we have the Republicans in the city as well. And there's nothing wrong with Republicans. I grew up as one. But the problem here is that we don't have an opposite voice saying what another side believes in. And I believe that is a critical problem that we have right now. I also believe that we need to stop the assault against the choice of women to choose their own health choices, and stop the assault against Roe versus Wade. I think that's probably the second. Thank you.
Mrs. Richardson, you have a 30-second wrap-up if you'd like.
Well, I would take more than 30 seconds to rebut some of the things you just said, but I would say that, and I want all to know that I am pro-life, and I believe in women. I am a strong woman, but I believe that we need to defend the defenseless.
Thank you. We're back to the prosecuting attorneys. This question is to Mr. Grogan. Sure. You have been criticized for dismissing cases. How and why do cases get dismissed?
There's a whole host of factors that go into, whether a case gets dismissed or not. The case that Mr. Ratliff was talking about earlier about the identity, we provided evidence of the defendant's identity. The judge dismissed the case, not us. Again, I've devoted half my career as a prosecutor. I've prosecuted 800 felony cases. Mr. Ratliff wants to pick apart a few of them. And quite frankly, the reason why he wants to attack my record is because you don't have one, Mr. Ratliff.
Mr. Ratliff?
Yes, I mean, there are a variety of reasons for cases and why they get dismissed. And back there on the table, I have literature for everybody. A motion filed by my opponent in 2018 CR 448. The case was indicted, prosecuted, the individual changed his plea, and the case was disposed of with intervention. The case was completed. My opponent picks up the file, does not even understand the case has been handled. So what's he do? He prosecutes the individual again and has to dismiss the case. And what's he write in it? Inadvertent mistake. The person's already been indicted. I didn't know. Read it. I provided it for you. Those are the kind of mistakes that are happening, and my office and my prosecutor's office will never make a mistake like that. Thank you.
Mr. Grogan, you have a 30-second wrap-up if you'd like.
In that particular instance, yes, I will concede. The police brought the file up again, and the individual was charged again. We made a mistake, quite frankly, okay? You're going to hear a politician say something. We made a mistake. What I can guarantee you is not perfection. I've never said I'm perfect. What I offer you every day as your county prosecutor is my honest services. And I want you to take a real good look between Mr. Ratliff and I and know which one will and which one, well, I'll let you draw your own conclusions.
Thank you to the state representatives. Mrs. Richardson, according to your answer to the voter's guide, I ask you, what are your comprehensive solutions to end our drug epidemic?
Oh, I'm glad to address that again, since I just mentioned to you that the drug epidemic is seriously a very compelling problem. I had mentioned to you, and I believe very firmly, that this has to be something where we all work together. It isn't going to be able to be solved in one way. We've got to look at access to drugs. We have to look at education. We have to look at prevention. We've got to support law enforcement. And we've got to work together. And that means not-for-profits, parents, school representatives, leaders of churches, the drug court, and even our local governments. And when great heads get together and work from the bottom to the top, from the top down, we are going to see improvements. We already are. Thank you.
Mr. Coble.
Well, we both agree that the opioid problem is a huge problem. I believe that it isn't solved by throwing more people in jail. I think that throwing people in jail just makes them harder when they come out. I believe we need education. I believe we need intervention. And I believe that we need to work together as a community to help these people that are in dire straits. They don't want to be there. You know they don't want to be there. I don't want them there. You don't want them there. We need to reach out and we need to find ways that we can all help them. We've got $2.7 billion in a rainy day fund that for some reason or other we want to hoard. Well, we can take some of that and put that towards opioid intervention. That's my decision on that.
Thank you. Mrs. Richardson, you may have 30 seconds.
Yes, I want to just address this concept of the rainy day fund. I believe that rainy day funds are intended for emergencies, and the current state government has worked hard to build up a rainy day fund so that we can use it when we really need it. And my thinking is similar to his, and that is the opioid epidemic is something that we could use it for.
Thank you. To listeners on the radio this evening, if you would like to call in with some questions, the phone number you may call in on is 419-843-7545. The number again for listeners that are listening live on the radio is 419-843-7545. Prosecuting attorney question next. Mr. Grogan, this is for you. You tout that your office has filed on over $1 million in tax foreclosures. How much has actually been collected?
That's a great question, and I appreciate that question. So when I came into the office, I came in at the end of October. So from January to October of 2017, there were about 49 parcels that have been filed on. And so about 5 per month. We're averaging now about 15 per month, maybe a little over that. So it's going to take some time to get those cases moving. So these cases take about a year. So with respect to the cases that I've done, we've had several sheriff sales. A lot of these properties don't sell at the sheriff sale, and so we have to have another sheriff sale or perhaps an auditor sale. We had the first one last year. It was the first one in 26 years or something. So I don't have an exact number, but what I know is that we have filed on over 160 parcels seeking $1.3 million in back taxes. Of the $8 million that was discussed earlier, we're making a dent. And my suspicion is once those properties come up for sale, we're going to be in a lot better financial and fiscal shape.
Thank you, Mr. Ratliff.
Out of that answer, I heard nearly zero to very small amount has actually been collected. His plan, and if anybody wants to hear what his plan was, it's file the cases. No plan, no organization, just start getting them filed so he could tout how much he's filed on. He's filed on 1.3 million, can't tell you what he's collected on. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a problem brought forth by Mark Russell when he ran in 2016. Who was in the prosecutor's office at that time not filing foreclosures? My opponent. Now all of a sudden he gets appointed as the lead prosecutor and he wants to be the solution to the problem. You can't be a solution to a problem when you were the problem in the office in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, he's not collecting. All he's done is file. Thank you.
Mr. Grogan.
Thank you. We see on the ballot the DD Board, Pleasant Schools, Marion County Children's Services, coming to taxpayers in need of more money. 60 cents of every dollar of property taxes that's collected goes to the schools. About 20% goes to the county general fund. The other 20% goes to the township in which the property sits. I guarantee you my opponent didn't know that breakdown. I'm doing what I can as the county prosecutor. I didn't set the priorities as an assistant. I do as your county prosecutor, and I do it every day.
For Mr. Coble and Mrs. Richardson, now there is several questions on this card. I'm only able to ask one. So, Mr. Coble, what is your position on health care for women?
That's kind of a strange question. I think they should all have health care. I personally believe we ought to move towards a health care for everyone. That's a position that I stand on. And I know the next question is, how do you pay for it? Well, let's figure that out. There are 48 other countries in this world that are front-running countries that all do it. We're the only one that doesn't do it. So I think we can find an answer to that. I also believe that women have the right to choose what happens to their body. And that goes along with the Roe v. Wade problem that unfortunately, we're going to face fairly soon. I think women and men should be absolutely equal in what they get, both in salary and in health care. Thank you.
Mrs. Richardson.
Healthcare for women is important. I know a lot of women who are struggling. Some of them don't have what they need for their children, and they'll take them to clinics just to be able to care for them. For me, I believe that we are to be treated equally. I think this question is really getting at perhaps the use of government dollars to fund abortions, and I'm not really sure where we're going with the question. I wish there was some clarification. It's making me. I look at it and I just say very simply, men and women deserve the same health care. Children deserve health care. I will work hard to find a way to provide for all people. And I know that there's a way we can do it. And we'll all have to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you. To our county commissioners, this is to Tara. Yes.
So I was gonna have to open the window there.
We started out with the other end of the table being neglected this evening. Now we've neglected your end. So, Ms. Dyer, why do you support issue 1?
Who said I supported that? Is that the question?
The questioner did.
I don't recall saying anything about
Okay.
that. Okay, so, but anyways, I agree with Jeff Ratliff. Ohio is leading the country in the number of people in prisons, and our legislators have failed miserably on prison reform. Even with the problem of prison overcrowding, and whereas it adversely affects black and brown individuals, I support the spirit in which this issue was inspired, but ultimately it's up to the legislators to do something immediately to combat prison reform. That's why it's placed in the hands of the voters, just like the marijuana issue was. Thus, I'm going to support whatever outcome that you voters render on November 6th. It's in the state constitution, and therefore it requires legislation to change it.
Mr. Stuyvesant?
I'm adamantly against issue 1. I just think those people, as Mr. Grogan said, they need to, you do the crime, you need to pay the fine. So that's my philosophy on issue 1. So I know we have a lot of people in prison, but they did a crime, they need to pay the duty.
Thank you. Mrs. Dyer, you have 30 seconds if you'd like to do a rebuttal. Wrap up.
I firmly believe, as you do, that if they do the crime, they need to do the time. But sometimes when truth in sentencing, sometimes when you go into a prison and you see the adverse effect it has on particular cultures, I think that, to me, is problematic. So it goes back to prison reform for me, and as it adversely affects other cultures, then that's where the problem is, and we need to work on prison reform. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Russell, you do not have any judicial experience. How does your experience as a law director prepare you to be a judge?
You know, I mentioned earlier that I'm privileged to have served you as a prosecutor for over 26 years. And you know, as a prosecutor, the work I do and other prosecutors do as prosecutors is really the same work that a judge does, even more to some extent, because a prosecutor will receive a case from law enforcement, the city police, the county sheriff, and there may be some additional need to investigate as a prosecutor. So we work with law enforcement to investigate.
Okay.
We build the case, we examine the facts, we evaluate the witnesses, we listen to the testimony of the witnesses through affidavits of their own oral testimonies, and then we make decisions as prosecutors on whether there's enough substance to take the case forward with a charge. You know, a judge does a similar thing. Judge sits in the courtroom, listens to the facts that's presented to him or her, and then makes a decision. A prosecutor does the same thing as a judge, and as your judge, I will continue the practice of holding criminals accountable and making our community more safe.
Mr. Warner.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we need to draw a clear distinction between what Mr. Russell does and what I do. Mr. Russell likes to refer to himself in these kind of forums as a prosecutor. Mr. Russell is the elected law director for the city of Marion and has been for over 20 years. Mr. Russell has, throughout the course of his career, exercised his discretion, as it is privileged to do, to basically entrust the day-to-day responsibilities of handling all of the in-court prosecution of the criminal cases for which his office is responsible to his appointed assistants. I, for the past 7 years, have served as a judicial official. When I did not get an opportunity to respond to Mr. Russell's previous comments because the question was put to him, as it has been again here, so he'll get the opportunity to rebut this. But when he makes the reference to me as a magistrate as being a quote-unquote helper to the judge, that is outrageous. It completely misrepresents what I do. Magistrates are judicial officials. I have a proven record over 7 years of service as a judicial official. I am proud to have the support of the Marion County Fraternal Order of Police, who knows the kind of job that I do.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Mr. Russell, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. As I've mentioned, I'm proud to have had your support 5 prior election days to be your prosecutor. My opponent has misrepresented the fact. As your elected law director, I am the chief prosecutor in your Marion Municipal Court, and I have been for 26 years. And we've set the bar in Marion County. We've raised the standard as to harsh sentencing. For some months, our sentencing was more harsh than the common police court. I, as the lead prosecutor, handle the most difficult cases in our court. That's vehicular homicide. And I handle the, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. We are down to the home stretch. We have about 5 minutes left. 3 minutes, I'm told. So,
Yes.
to Mr. Coble and Mrs. Richardson, what is your stance on the Second Amendment and gun rights for law-abiding citizens? Mr. Coble.
Well, I'll start off by saying, and I didn't need to say this because I wasn't offered any money from the NRA anyway, but I took the pledge when the kids asked us to take the pledge. The kids from Florida that were caught in their school for hours worrying about whether they're going to get killed or not. I took the pledge and said I would not take any money from the NRA. I have nothing against the NRA. I've hunted, but I did not want to take, first of all, I don't want to take money from any PAC or any group like that. I think we should do away with that type of electing people. Money has taken over where thought should come in. I forgot where I was going. Can you give me the question again, quick?
What is your stance on the Second Amendment and gun rights for law-abiding citizens?
I do believe we should be able to go hunt. I believe we should be able to protect our family, and that's where I stand.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson.
When I graduated from West Point, I raised my right hand and swore to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That includes the Second Amendment. I've gone to war, and I'm willing to fight to defend the Second Amendment and our rights to bear arms. But I also believe in a balanced approach. And so where there are situations where we can make a difference to ensure that there are important guidelines for legally purchasing a firearm and to protect others I think you'll find me to be a very reasonable person. Thank you.
We'll try to get one more question in here. Mark Russell, you stated we haven't done a good job holding criminals accountable. Why?
One person only need turn, or a person only need turn to yesterday's Marion Star. At the very bottom of the Marion Star, it says, Marion man pleads guilty to dealing heroin. If you take a close look at that person's record, he was convicted of trafficking heroin in 14, trafficking heroin in 15, and it's now 2018. We've talked about the opioid epidemic occurring in our community. I'm sure many of you know family members or friends that have suffered because of the addiction epidemic. We need to change. We need to stop the revolving door of allowing traffickers in our community. I will advocate for change of political policies having to do with who's released back into our community from our jail. I have a history of holding criminals accountable successfully in Marion County. I mentioned earlier, we've set the bar high. We will continue to do that, and I will do that as your common pleas court judge.
Mr. Warner.
Yeah, well, again, as the question's been posed to Mr. Russell, I guess he gets the first word and the last word on every question that's been posed to our race, but I will say in the time that I do have that there is a very serious problem with drug addiction and drug-related crime in our community. There's absolutely no secret about that. We need to get very serious about attacking this problem if we want to move our community forward. There's a saying that goes, elections have consequences. I believe that this election is maybe the most critical election in my lifetime for the Marion community. And I believe that the decisions going to be made by voters in this election are going to determine the future of our community for the next generation. I will say once again that I am very proud to have the support and endorsement of the Marion County Fraternal Order of Police, who knows what kind of person I am, knows what kind of judicial official I have been in the 7 years in which I have served, knows what kind of judicial official I will be when I move from the municipal court down the street to the common pleas court, where I can go from presiding over misdemeanors to presiding over felonies.
Thank you. Mr. Russell, you have 30 seconds for wrap-up.
Thank you. I'm privileged to have had the FOP's endorsements in each of those 5 prior campaigns I mentioned many times this evening. I understand their frustration. I've seen it firsthand. They too are frustrated with what we're experiencing. They too want change. But I'll tell you what's more important is your endorsement. I appreciate the fact that you've endorsed me on 5 prior occasions. I asked for your vote on November 6th. Your vote for me. We will make a change. We will ensure our neighborhoods are more safe.
Thank you, and we are now out of time. To the candidates, thank you very much for appearing this evening, both to the contested and non-contested candidates. If I may have just a moment, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring the event this evening. Also to the Marion City Schools, the Harding High School staff and administration, the Harding High School custodial staff, Mr. John Mullins, and the Harding Telecom students. And finally, to the WZMO staff, Greg Hodges and Tom Wagner back at the radio station, and Mr. Grant Powell here as engineer with me. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.